Undertaker versus HBK. The Rock versus John Cena. Kurt Angle versus Shawn Michaels. Ed Guerrero versus Rey Mysterio. The Rock and Hogan. These are all matches that we did get at WrestleMania. But I'm here with the OG and we're going to talk about the matches that we didn't get. This is Wrestling for Idiots.
Coming through.
Name's Delboy. I'm here with the main man. What's good, bro? How you doing? So in the previous episode, we spoke about WrestleMania. We spoke about, the rise of WrestleMania, where Vince came from in terms of buying the company, poaching talent as you do, and making this massive spectacle, WrestleMania. And over the years, we've had some great WrestleManias. We've had some duds of WrestleManias. Would you like to mention some duds that we've had for WrestleMania?
I still can't bear to watch WrestleMania 9. Well, I just can't do it. WrestleMania 11 too. I just can't do it. Like,
Enough. Which one's your favourite one?
WrestleMania 9's the one that they don't talk about.
That's his favourite one.
WrestleMania 9. He's got a t-shirt. I've seen it. They sold one. No.
It was enough that I bought it. But yes, we're going to talk about the matches that didn't happen. As we know, the wrestling industry is very volatile. You could always have plans for a certain match to happen, and due to unforeseen circumstances, anything can change. We never really know what's going to happen. Some matches are set in stone, others are not. But which one do you want to start? What match do you want to start with? What do you want to grace us with in terms of some knowledge?
I think the one I want to start with is Bret and Shawn 2.
WrestleMania 13?
WrestleMania 13, Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels. That match would have been a big match at the time. Well, I say it would have been a big match. It would have been a big match to some people, but I don't know if the company thought that at the time because business was down. Yeah. And when business is down, Vince always goes back to big guys. WrestleMania 13 ended up being Undertaker and Sid. And Bret and Austin underneath, which was obviously...
I just did want to ask you, so let's say, imagine it did happen to be Shawn versus...
I know what you're going to ask me.
Shawn versus Bret, because I feel like with wrestling, there's always this ripple effect, this butterfly effect of, if certain things don't happen, maybe someone might not get a push, maybe someone's push might get delayed, so we look at it in terms of maybe something like King of the Ring that Austin won. Yeah. He wasn't initially meant to win that.
He was not.
Triple H was meant to win. So that could have also been something that deterred his run. Do you think this match of HBK and Bret could have further delayed Austin's rise?
Yes. Because that night, the double turn that they did was perfect in Steve at that time. Do you know who he was supposed to work with on that show?
Who was meant to work with?
David Boy Smith.
That would have been a good match.
That would have been a good match. They were building up to that until Shawn hurt himself. Well, didn't hurt himself, I don't know. But that was the match. The match they were building up to. But that was supposed to be the main event of WrestleMania 13 in Chicago. They did the Iron Man match the year before, and they had agreed that when Bret came back, although it was a bit iffy if he was going to come back after a while, but he did come back. The main event of WrestleMania 13 was supposed to be Bret and Shawn for the world title, and Bret was supposed to go over. Yeah, he done the job the year before. He was supposed to win it the year after. I've even heard Bret talk about the finish that he wanted to do because he was going to turn heel anyway. Yeah, but because he'd been watching UFC, he wanted to get Shawn in an ankle lock, and he even had an idea that they could have something snap under the ring to give the impression that he broke Shawn's ankle, and then he could just walk away with a towel and a huff, angrily walk away on And he said he told Shawn that, and Shawn said he loved it, but Bret knew that he didn't really like it. But so what happened was that Bret had come back. He nearly went to WCW. He decided to stay. Vince gave him a 20 years. I'm not going to go into, that's another show for another time. But yeah, Shawn was world champion. He, business was really down. They were in a really bad state. They were in debt. They couldn't even afford to pay the water cooler bill at Titan Towers. They got the water coolers repossessed. It was a rough time for them. It really was. And WrestleMania was on the horizon. Bret was slowly turning heel. If you remember from that period, it was a really masterful turn. He was slowly turning heel. It was every week he was just getting more frustrated with everything, and he was whining, and the fans hated it. And every week he was getting closer to this destination where he was going to turn at WrestleMania. However, Shawn had a knee injury. He did have a knee injury. And the belief is that he had a knee injury, but he could have worked.
Yeah.
But he didn't want to work, and he told them that he wasn't able to work. And he, instead of doing the job, he forfeited the title. He gave it up on a Thursday episode of Raw, and he vacated the title. Now, I want to say something about Shawn Michaels, because Shawn Michaels has a rep in wrestling for... I think Shawn Michaels has lost more titles by forfeit than any other person in wrestling history. If you look at the amount of titles he's actually lost, he's only probably done about 3 jobs in his whole career. It's like, throughout that time, he just gave belts away because he wouldn't do jobs or whatever. And that one, he gave it up. And, you know, people were skeptical at the time that he wasn't really hurt. But what can you do?
Yeah.
He's hurt. And
especially with the kind of pull that Shawn Michaels had in the company already as it is.
Yeah, you know, they saw the promo, he was crying, he lost his smile.
Smile.
And some people believed him, others were like, we'll see. And
Shawn's just being Shawn.
The week before WrestleMania, you know, he came out on Raw and he said he was going to be at WrestleMania doing commentary. And to let everyone know what was going on, he went to the top rope and he did a backflip off the top rope during the interview, and he landed on his feet. When have you ever seen Shawn Michaels go off the top rope and do a backflip during an interview?
I mean, most of the time he even does a moonsault. He doesn't even do it like a full rotation anyway. He's still less of a backflip on his feet.
During this interview, like Bryan Danielson does, he landed right on his feet, and that was his way of letting everyone know
it's a whack.
And they were furious.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Brett was furious because they'd been building up to this point, and then, you know, he went into that match with Steve Austin with a chip on his shoulder. He really did, because he was so annoyed.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, that worked out for the best. It really did, because they created...
Amazing match.
That's my favorite WrestleMania match of all time. I love that match. But that was that's the reason why Shawn and Brett never happened. They did it later on. They did it in November.
Yeah.
But WrestleMania that year, it was like the 5th biggest wrestling pay-per-view of the year. WrestleMania at that time did not have the cachet that it would have later on.
Yeah. Let me think of another match to give you. Let me give you an actual WrestleMania. You can give me a match that you think you could tell me a match that was meant to happen. One of my favorite WrestleMania is WrestleMania 22. Can you tell me if there was a match that was meant to happen that year that didn't happen?
Eddie Guerrero and Shawn Michaels.
Oh, God.
That would have been... I don't know. I don't know what that would have been like, but that would have been something. That really would have been something, but unfortunately Eddie passed away. But that was the plan at that time.
Teasing it as well.
They were teasing it. They were teasing it. You know, Eddie his health at that time was really bad, and he was in a lot of pain. So I don't know what the match would have been like at WrestleMania. I know on that stage, at that setting, he would have gone all out. Especially
like the previous WrestleManias, he had the match with Kurt Angle, we had the match with Rey Mysterio.
He had the program with Rey, which they were always good matches, but he was struggling at that point. So I don't know what he'd have been like leading up to WrestleMania, but the thought of those two in that setting, that would have been legendary. That would have been absolutely legendary. Another famous match that never happened was Hogan and Warrior from WrestleMania 7.
Yeah.
That never happened. And the reason why that never happened was because they didn't sell tickets for WrestleMania 7. They didn't sell enough tickets.
Yeah.
So they pulled the promotion of that one. So what happened was Hogan was going off to do Suburban Commando, and he did the job for Warrior at WrestleMania 6. Now, Warrior started his world title run, and his first program was against Rick Rude, which he'd already done. So he started his world title run doing a retread of a feud that he'd done the year before, and it didn't do well. It didn't draw well.
Yeah.
Hogan was kind of looking on from the movie set, and he was kind of laughing to himself because, you know, look, he handed the title to this or whatever.
Exactly.
So by the time SummerSlam came around, they'd had 5 months of not being able to draw with Warrior on top, and it was already decided, right, cool, we can't go with this main event. The biggest story about that, though, was that they had booked the LA Coliseum for WrestleMania 7.
Yeah.
100,000 seats. 100,000 seats. Do you know how many seats they'd sold up to January of that year?
I'd probably say maybe 10, 20 if that.
They sold 14,000 seats for about a 6-month period.
Yeah.
They were not hot at that time because what had happened was they introduced Sergeant Slaughter. They brought him back. And Slaughter was supposed to be the American hero in the 80s. and they brought him back as a heel.
Yeah.
And he was
Colonel Mustafa.
Yeah, he was mates with Saddam Hussein.
Yeah.
He was mates with Saddam Hussein. He was a confidant of Saddam Hussein. That's the way they promoted it. And at that time, during the Gulf War, the media were appalled by it, that they had this guy on TV.
American hero.
Yeah. Who had turned...
Saddam sympathizer.
Yeah. And while people are dying over there, you're exploiting this on your television. And WWE took a massive hit at that time. They got kicked off of NBC during that period because people just lost interest. They were like, we're not watching this. So 14,000 seats. They did over 60 the year before at Skydome. They came back and they couldn't even sell 20,000 seats for the next Mania, which is telling how much they'd fallen.
Yeah.
And they didn't want Hogan and Warrior to be in that setting with such a small attendance in a massive building. And Hogan was never going to do that. Hogan cannot be seen.
It's not going to work for me, brother. It's not going to work for me.
Yeah. So they had to get the belt off of Warrior. So the plans changed. Hogan and Warrior was scrapped. They said they will do it another time. They put the belt on Slaughter. And then they said that Slaughter had received death threats. So they decided to cancel the LA Coliseum and they wanted to move it to the intimate confines of the LA Sports Arena, which happened to have 16,000 seats. And when it came to showtime, they actually didn't sell out either.
Yeah.
So even then they couldn't sell it out. But it was, it also had the memorable Randy Savage Ultimate Warrior match on that show as well, which was probably the best match that Warrior ever had that night. And Warrior beat Savage and took his career because Savage was going off to get off the steroids so he could have a baby, which never happened. They got divorced. Him and Elizabeth got divorced after that. Do you remember when Savage came back, he was wearing a T-shirt because he was so conscious of the way he looked.
He changed his whole style.
Yeah, he did. He was so thin. He came back a lot smaller. When he went to WCW, he took the top off because they didn't have a drug policy.
Yeah, so he can go back onto the juice.
Yeah, so he got massive again in WCW.
I really liked his WCW attire though.
Oh, it's great. It was great.
Madness. I loved it.
I love it. When he was in NWO too.
Yeah.
Like he had a really good WCW run. People, I think, sleep on it. He had a lot. The matches with Flair and Page. Yeah.
Matches with Page were.
Look, they were really good. That was my favourite feud of that year, 97. I liked it better than Bret and Austin, actually. I thought it was a really good feud. But yeah, Hogan and Warrior did not happen for those reasons. Another one that didn't happen.
I was just about to say, let's stick on Hogan and Flair.
Hogan and Flair. Hogan and Flair was supposed to happen at WrestleMania. I say it was supposed to happen, but it depends on who you speak to. So now Ric Flair says he was promised the main event against Hogan at WrestleMania 8. Sid says that he was promised when he came in, he was promised the main event against Hulk Hogan. So if you look at the show, they promote it as a double main event.
Yeah.
Hogan and Sid and Flair and Savage. I suppose they had to keep Flair sweet. So they booked him in a double main event, but they gave the main event to Sid. But the thing with Hogan and Flair, and you'd think that the two biggest names in rival promotions coming together, you'd think that would be a massive deal. And it was to some people, but not to Vince McMahon.
Yeah.
He never saw it. It's kind of like Undertaker and Sting. It was big to a lot of people, but not to Vince. Yeah. And I don't think Vince McMahon ever saw Ric Flair on the level as Hulk Hogan, which he wasn't, to be fair. Yeah. He wasn't. But I don't think Vince McMahon ever looked at Ric Flair and saw him at that level at all. Yeah. And when he got him in, because, Flair had left WCW, he was fired.
Yeah.
They fired him. Jim Herd hated Ric Flair towards the end, and he fired him. Flair had the belt. He was owed $50,000. Because back then you had to put a deposit on the world title, so that you didn't leave the promotion and double cross the promotion. So if you did that, you're costing yourself $50,000. He wanted $50,000 back from WCW. Jim Herd told him to fuck off. Yeah,
and parading the belt.
Yeah, he took the belt. He sent the belt to Vince McMahon, and Vince McMahon had Bobby Heenan with the NWA Championship on their television. But the problem was that when Flair came in, he was never treated as being the big world champion from their promotion. If you listen to the commentary, he was a joke. Yeah. Gorilla Monsoon was like, he's not a real world champion. I don't know where he got that belt from. He's not Hulk Hogan. It was always, even when Vince McMahon would get stars, even up till Cody probably, he would get these guys from other promotions, and even then he would still let everyone know,
they're not WWE.
You're not one of my guys. And I remember when Dana White, when they bought Pride, I remember at a press conference, this guy says, one of these journalists said to him, so what happens when Mirko Cro Cop or Quentin Jackson beats your fighters? And then Dana was like, they work for me, they are my fighters. Yeah. And I wish Vince McMahon
had that same type of mentality. I feel like we're only starting to really get that.
With Cody.
Yeah.
With Cody.
And we had it with AJ as well.
And AJ as well, excuse me.
Yeah.
But if you look at
for the most part, most people that have come into the company have just been guys from another company. Yeah. They're not our guys, so we're not gonna we're gonna hire them. They're good wrestlers, but we're not gonna give them the treatment that we feel like.
Yeah, even Goldberg came in, they completely changed Bill Goldberg and start, and had him do longer matches. Like, who wants to see Bill Goldberg do 15-minute matches? I don't.
I was watching his match, I think it was the Hustle main event. I think it might have been against Ogawa. It was like 30.
Oh, that was 2002.
Terrible match.
Yeah,
absolutely trash. You can't put that man in a match for more than 10 minutes, in fact.
They had him against Jericho at Bad Blood, and he was selling for Jericho, and he doesn't know how to sell. He never had to do it. It just doesn't work. But so they had Flair come in, and Flair, they put them on the road together, Hogan and Flair, first time round. The first ever match was in Oakland, California, and they did 14,000 people. Great.
That's good.
Biggest attendance they had in Oakland in a while. And they ended in disqualifications. Hogan won disqualifications because, you got to save the match. By the time they got to the Survivor Series, they were still doing that main event. And because Flair had been on TV and he wasn't presented on television as being that big of a deal, I think that really hurt him on the road. And I just don't think WWE fans had ever really saw Ric Flair as being that guy, because WWE fans, they were taught to always believe that the other guys on the other channel they're also rats. Yeah. They're not up to, look at when WCW wrestlers came into WWE or whatever, and it was always, Paige or even Goldberg were getting booed. Yeah. Scott Steiner was getting booed. It's just like, you're just not at that level. And I think they had that mentality back then as well. And by the time the Rumble came around, there was no necessity for Hogan and Flair at WrestleMania, so they switched it up. They put the belt on Flair because Hogan was leaving. Hogan had lied on Arsenio Hall. Arsenio Hall has said, I'd asked him if he'd ever done steroids. He said, no, I'd never done steroids. I only used them 3 times when I was injured. He said that. He was obviously lying. All these wrestlers came out of the woodwork and said, I gave Hogan steroids myself. I injected him, and he's
been catched.
Yeah, he was
catched.
And they wanted to let the heat die down, so they sent him away for a year. So
that's why when he came back, he was just skinny.
He was skinny. He was off, and
which was a good thing, because it ushered in a new era of the likes of the Bret Harts, the Shawn Michaels, Razor Ramones, to not be the big brolic guys, but the work rate.
He looked good when he came back.
No, he did, yeah.
He looked really good. He was slim and, he was still big.
Yeah.
But by Hogan standards, he wasn't. But, yeah, I mean, for your health at this day as well, isn't it? But, yeah, so he was leaving, so he couldn't have the world title in that particular program with Sid, so they had to put it on Flair with Savage going after it.
Yeah.
And Hogan and Sid was in the main event. They brought the Warrior back that night to feud with Papa Shango after that, which didn't do well at all. But, yeah, that's why Hogan and Flair didn't happen.
And WCW
did it days later, and they did massive business with it.
I heard.
Yeah.
Final match. I feel like this is a match that a lot of us as fans expected. My favorite WrestleMania of all time, WrestleMania 18. Can you tell me a match that was meant to happen but didn't happen?
The original match that was booked for that show.
I feel like we've spoken about this guy so many times today, but we're here. Here's WrestleMania.
Hogan and Austin was the match that Vince McMahon originally planned to do, and Austin didn't want to do it.
Yeah.
For one, he didn't think that Hogan was up to the task, and I don't think at that time, he didn't want to work with Hogan.
Yeah.
I think Austin was still hurt by a lot of the things that happened to him in WCW, and one of the things that happened to him in WCW was when Hogan came in, those WCW wrestlers that had been there for years, they were really pushed, straight to the back of the line. Jim Duggan came in and beat Austin on pay-per-view in 30 seconds in his debut, for the US Championship. And then he got fired after. Austin was fired after that. They didn't need him at that point. And I think he still held a lot of resentment towards Hogan and Eric Bischoff and and even Ric Flair at that point. And so when he became Stone Cold Steve Austin, he was the biggest star in the company, and Hogan comes in. why am I working with this guy?
Yeah.
You know, why am I? He didn't do anything for me. I'm not working with this guy. And they said, you want to work with Scott Hall? You like Scott Hall? So I was like, yeah, I prefer to wrestle Scott Hall than Hulk Hogan. But
what match that was?
You know, that match was bad. Like, I mean, Hogan and Rock became a really legendary match, and I don't know what your opinions of it are, but I mean,
do you want to know?
Tell me.
It's the greatest shittest match I've ever seen. Like the spectacle of the match was brilliant. Just to see these two icons that face to face and that stare off that they had for a good how many minutes?
Oh, it was ages.
It was brilliant to see. But then when you go into, like, I love work rate. When you go into the depths of the match, oh God.
I hate the build up for that match.
I'm so happy we haven't done it for one of what's our show. Mandem, remind me. I've gone blank.
Wrestling's House.
Wrestling's House. I'm so happy we haven't done that match for Wrestling's House.
You know,
I will leave the studio.
You know, I've only watched that match once. I watched it that night, and I haven't watched it since. I don't have an affinity towards that match at all. It's just, you know, it's funny because
the best part is the ending when they do the pose off. That's about it.
That's cool. But you know, it's a classic match, and it's the best 2-star wrestling match of all time, I think. But Hogan ate him up in that match. It's funny because Hogan, remember, said, you know, I don't know why they were cheering him. If you watch the match, the guy's working the fucking babyface. He's eating Rock up throughout the match, and he outworked Rock. But the best thing about that was they did the match the next year in Montreal, and fucking Rock just killed Hogan in that match. He saw that match and he's like, "Oh, cool, next time
you've had your turn."
Yeah,
my turn.
And then he got his receipt in the next match. He fucking made Hogan look like an amateur in February the next year.
I think that's my favorite trope, making Hogan look like a waste man. Absolutely, that's why I love HBK versus Hogan.
Not many people did that. Not many people did that.
That's why I love HBK versus Hogan. I just making Hogan just look like just a little boy. It brings a tear to me.
You know the story of that match?
Might as well tell it while here. Bonus story.
They were supposed to do that match 3 times.
Yes, I remember. Yeah,
they were supposed to do that match. Sean,
let's go one apiece.
Yeah, and then they were going to do a rubber match, and Sean felt that he should have won that first match because he went in there as a heel, and obviously, if the babyface wins, why would there be another one in that connotation? And Hogan had creative control in his WWE contract, and what did he say? It don't work for me, brother.
It don't work for me, brother.
It don't work for me, brother. And that was the build-up. So you see the build-up for that match. Sean,
I know Hogan was pissed.
Yeah, he was brutal.
Pissed.
They weren't really together in the build-up because Hogan didn't do TVs. So Sean was left to his own devices, and
which was brilliant.
Oh my God, he buried Hogan throughout that whole thing. Absolutely buried that cunt 6 feet beneath the earth. And by the time they got to that main event at SummerSlam, Hogan was like, nah. No. I'm not doing this. And then you could tell the match. You can watch the match and it's
you could tell that Hogan was over as well. Like just from the selling.
Yeah.
Just tell that he's just like, yeah.
Yeah. And
let's just get through this match. And he left.
And he got his win and that we ain't doing this again. For you to do that again to me, you mad? Hogan is one of the best businessmen in wrestling. But I think Brock has beaten him, to be fair. But at that time, he was number 1 in terms of getting exactly what he wanted for doing the least amount of work. But yeah, those are some of the matches in WrestleMania history that never happened. I mean, we could go on, but those are the key ones.
There we have it. I've been Delboy.
I've been Knowledge.
And this is Wrestling for Idiots.